Oh, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our special meeting of Perth East Council, the 16th day of July. I'd like to call our meeting to order. If everyone could please bow their head for a moment of reflection. Thank you. We have a motion to confirm the agenda, and it says that the agenda as prepared for July 16, 2024 special meeting of council of the Township of Perth East be approved as received. Moved by Amanda, second by Hugh. All in favor? Carried. If you have pecuniary interest, you can disclose that now or as the meeting goes along. We don't have any delegations tonight. Before we get to our reports, I think tonight what we'll do is we're going to relax the rules and just make it a little more informal to have discussion, and I'm hoping that staff will participate as well as council. So I'm just going to do things a little different tonight. So first of all, we have under 6.1, we have our council budget visiting, and this is where council members all sent in comments on different questions. Is there any of the comments that people sent in? Is there anything you want to explain more, do in more in depth, be added that we look into it? Bob?
I guess you have to start somewhere, and we always use CPI, so cost of living really is related to what the consumer purchases, so transportation, housing, food, the other things, right? Municipalities can use that for certain percentage of their budget, I guess, like wages. But when it comes to replacing, fire trucks or snow plows or bridges, 3% isn't going to cut it. So I don't think that you should ever use CPI as your benchmark, because I think someone should come up with a municipal benchmark that you would use, and therefore be a little more on track each and every year instead of falling behind with that bridge that's going to cost another $100,000 because X number of years ago when you estimated it, everything has increased from the steel and cement and the labor, etc. So if you want to pretend that you're doing a good job at 3%, then we'll just continue to fall behind. So I don't think that any municipal council ever wants to do more, but any expense that I have always goes up more than 3%. So if I went to my insurance company, what are they going to tell me? Well, that's just the way it is, right? I could pick on you, I guess, if I want, Jerry, but everything goes up for a reason. And I think that you have to explain to the taxpayer that of all the things that you have, if you want to continue to receive them, and basically by this document, nobody wants to cut anything, nobody wants any changes. So I think you have to do a little better job than just saying it looks like it's 3%. So I would hope that we'd have some further discussion later on about what the actual monies needed to be set aside for future expenditures really are.
Okay, do you want to have that discussion now? We can ask staff if we think we are putting enough away as we go along. Who wants to? You want to answer? Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to maybe not necessarily answer, but I think echo some of Councillor Bob's comments. CPI is it's a basket of goods, and a municipality, we're not necessarily purchasing food as one of our primary things. We are focused on things like fuel costs, energy costs, and those don't necessarily always align up with CPI costs, as well as the infrastructure pieces that Bob spoke about. So I do think CPI is kind of used as something from a consideration, because I think it's easily understood by the taxpayers as well as the staff and managers when they're working through budgets. Between 60 and 70% of our operating costs are related to salaries and benefits, and those are typically in line with CPI. So that is a key factor, but I do think, we try to keep track of things around things like fuel and energy costs that are significant for municipalities that aren't necessarily weighted the same way in the CPI that they probably should be for municipalities. But I do think staff do appreciate having some target as a starting point as we're working through budget process, And that I think is kind of the basis of the first question, is just some sense. And you guys as a council, I think, do a good job following what the trends are as it relates to the market. We do know that CPI is in around 3% thus far. And we see that later in tonight's report. So basically, in terms of the responses to the question, I see kind of a consensus that, you know, the target is between the 3% and 5% as a budget increase for 2025, and that's really just a starting point as we move through the budget.
Andrew?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess, yeah, CPI, I agree in a lot of ways. It doesn't really capture, you know, what it should, and sometimes it's helpful and not. It's a number. I know some of our neighbors are really expensive to live in. They have a lot of services, and I'm hearing from people who live in these communities, it's like a second mortgage. And some people feel like they're leasing their private property from the municipality. I don't think we want to get to a point where the costs are so high. So 3% on this year, or whatever comes forward, 5%, 10%, 2%. That's on top of last year's 5%, on top of the year before is 7%, right? So I think there might be some opportunity to do better individually at each department, and I'm not saying any department's not doing well. I'm just saying that gives them some tools to focus on lowering costs, treat it a little more business-like, if that's possible in this municipal realm, and that's a lot bigger discussion than I'm prepared to have tonight. But I think there's some ways to not cut costs, but even be more efficient than we are right now. So yeah, CPI is kind of a bogus number. It is something, but we want to, I think the people who live here want to be, you know, cost effective and be able to live and do other things with their money instead of just paying taxes, right? Because at the end of the day, the tax guy, the tax sale on your house if you don't pay your taxes, right? So that, in a sense, you have no choice. You have to pay your taxes. So just thought I'd throw that out there for what I'm hearing on the street.
Go ahead, Amanda.
I'm just curious, not to put Paul on the spot, because I know she's making notes. Where do we, because I know at one point we were the second lowest tax rate in the county. So it was Perth South and then us. I think North Perth was the highest in the county, North Perth or Stratford. Do we happen to know where we currently rank in, like, from a county perspective, just out of curiosity?
Through you, Mayor. We do have the analysis. I don't have it pulled up right now, and we were right in that second to last lowest rate. Nothing had changed majorly, but I'll see if I can pull it up really quick.
So staff do a great job, I think, keeping expenses down. Unfortunately, there's some things we can't control: heat, hydro, gas. You know, things are in our world are going up and up and up, and I think we do a great job. We have done a great job so far, and I don't have any doubts that it'll be good this year too. We may not like the number, but that's the way the world is, and I think we have to live with it. So we have done a great job in the past. So I'm not sure if you want to go through these one by one and make comments, or you want to, like, that was number one about the budget increase. The second one was the services. What do we feel are pressing issues? Anybody want to talk on any of the things that they put on here or not, or? No? Okay, then the third one was about,
Sorry, not to interrupt, Barry, because I just if it's okay.
lump them together?
Yeah, if it's okay, I was just gonna kind of provide maybe what I interpreted when I saw the feedback for this question in particular. Looking at the feedback received from council, and I do think all of us on staff try to dig in a little bit and better understand some of the feedback that's there. When I look at number two, I think part of what's being addressed or looking for is ensuring our reserve contributions continue to help offset inflationary pressures and address future asset management needs. I think we touch on that in two separate spots based on the feedback received from council. So I'm just trying to establish items that we might perhaps include as part of a resolution out of here. So that's the way I interpreted the feedback, but certainly if other members of councils think I'm off base with that, I'm okay to hear that as well. But that's the way I envisioned kind of the feedback received in number 2.
Okay, anyone else wish to make comments? If not, then we'll go to the third one. Address infrastructure renewal or any other steps, processes consider implementing moving forward. I guess Bob kind of touched on that in the first, that maybe we need to look at, make sure we're putting enough money away for the future. Bob?
Yeah, and I know there's probably a report, Paul, that indicates in 2048, I think everything would be fully funded, right? Something to that effect. So in 24 years, you know, what will those costs be for, you know, replacement of this building or even its roof or other vehicles or, you know, whatever bridge, and we're going to be way behind. I'm not sure how you continue to update that spreadsheet other than just saying on a more regular basis that we're always behind. That's normal. And we're in a lot better shape than a lot of other places. It wasn't that long ago, and maybe Ron remembers the courthouse needed a new roof. Obviously, a slate roof's not that cheap to replace, so it was $1 million, and then, okay, council agrees on that, and where do we find the money? And staff just kind of go, well, we don't have any money. So that's not the case here. We have earmarked reserves for a lot of different departments, and everything's in order, but each year we still seem to fall behind just because that bridge last year cost another $100,000 that we weren't expecting, and you could prepare this list tomorrow and it would be out of date very quickly again. So I'm not really sure how we continue to stay on top of things. It's just something that needs to be focused upon as each, I don't know, term. Certainly when you look at some of the items that need to be replaced, there are a lot of bridges in what, 2028 or something. Like there's a lot of expenditures and they're all gonna be way more than you ever thought you were expecting. So what am I trying to say? I just think you have to really focus on those costs being more than 3% and being probably more like 10 or 15% on an ongoing basis, and be mindful that anytime you have a surplus or some extra funding, maybe it's time to top up some of those reserves that are falling behind.
Paul?
Through you, Mayor. To Councilor McMillan's point, yes, the infrastructure is deficit's supposed to be eliminated by 2048 based on the last asset management plan. However, we do report the current replacement values annually now for the OCIF funding. And I wanted to do some analysis based on that to see where we are based on the current replacement values to what they were and what we're putting away. Because that's one of my focuses, is we gotta maybe ramp up those transfers to reserves for the asset replacements. Whether it's feasible to go right to that amount so that we're still paid off or the deficit's eliminated in 2048, or we kind of step it in. That's another thing. So for budget deliberations, I'll have a bit of analysis on that. And we are due for a asset management update in 2025.
So the goal, just for a refresher with asset management, the goal is, so we have a building that's gonna cost us, say, $3 million. Are we to have the $3 million put away when we come to that replacement, or are we still able to borrow? The idea is to have the $3 million put away.
That's the ideal in a perfect world, yes. But inflationary costs make everything go up, and we're basing it on historical costs. So I want to try and transfer to that replacement value so that we're putting aside the full amount. It's going to be a big hit, though.
I get that, but I haven't seen anybody yet, or maybe some have, when they buy their house, they can put cash out for the whole thing, right? And almost to me is a little realistic, but I guess that's what the government wants us to do. Yeah. Okay. Jerry, it's your hand.
Just so I get a hand, thanks. Just so I get a handle on kind of what some of us have talked about, not everyone. Let's just say we come to what I think I'm hearing is if staff brings back, okay, our budget increase is 4% to keep the lights on and everything else with our regular contributions to reserves, et cetera. Are we thinking that we should be topping that up, let's say, to 8% then? That would be the increase. That 4% extra would be distributed amongst the reserves. That's kind of what I'm thinking I'm hearing. I'm just using those numbers, just as an example. That's probably what we're thinking of. Was that what we're thinking we would do?
Well, I'm a little concerned about that because we have the county starting at 11 or 12. So I want to know what the county's going to do before we would bump something here up like that. But that could be a possibility if we don't think we're putting enough away. Andrew?
No, it's from the conversation, I got a couple questions, hopefully. Treasurer Michaels can answer, apologize. So what I understood from previous discussions in the last 14 years was that asset management funds were, quote, for things along the way too. So are we really looking at that 2046 horizon, or is it big items along the way, bits and pieces of buildings along the way, right? So I'm not sure how the calculation is done. I just want to confirm that it's not, cookie cutter, put in a whole new building with all the things. It's for, and that's through the building betterment fund, right? And it's a little confusing. It's not straightforward for me at least, so.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor, that's the right concept, is it'll be replaced, the assets will be replaced as they come due. They're not all gonna be due 2048 when we're saying the infrastructure deficit's gonna be eliminated based on the historical numbers. It will be replacing, those funds will be replacing assets as they're coming due going forward. And that's what we're managing now. However, we're using larger amounts of those funds from the reserves based on the calculations that we're putting away. Does that make sense? Okay.
Okay, anyone else? Go ahead.
Maybe just one more comment around, and this is very simplified, and when the financial statements come forward, this is certainly a factor that I look at. I think every year as a target and as a very minimalist goal, we should be spending more on capital investments than our depreciation expenses. That should be like an easy baseline that because if we're not, then we're falling way behind. Because the depreciation is based on the historic values of our assets. So from a financial standpoint, there's lots of good information in our financial statements, but I would encourage council that, that becomes a focus item to make sure that we are spending in terms of reinvesting in our capital assets more than the depreciation that we're incurring with those assets. That should be a baseline target. But that's a very simplistic approach, but I think it helps a little bit in terms of the conversation that Treasurer Michaels and Councilor McCallum would have.
Okay, anything else on that one? If not, we'll move to the fourth one, and that's the budget process. Does anybody want to make comments on the process? Would like it, they want it changed? There's discussion of multi-year budget. They do that at the county. They do multi-year budget. I guess my only concern is that they're not spending more time on that, doing that than the regular, like, that creates a lot more work for staff. There's some things you can't change that you know that the budget's gonna start at, say, 2% or 3% or 5% before you even start. Like, that's what we know at the county. We already know we're starting at 11, right? Those things we can't change. So.
What's coming up in the future years too, like fire trucks for replacement or whatever too. So I'm fine with the way it is, doing it every year, and we still see those things that are coming up as well.
Mm-hmm. Andrew?
That's a good point. I'm just wondering what's happened in the last 3 years. Did anybody know that all this was going to happen and the big turnover in the money back in 2014? So if we made a 5-year budget or 5-year budget in 2018 to go till now. Is it really a good enough crystal ball to do that? That's why it seems like almost wasted effort. So, good points, but good luck.
Maybe we don't want to know what the future's like. Amanda?
I think there was sort of two questions posed to council in this section. One was the multi-year and one was approving budget before year end. So in my comments, I stated that I wasn't really comfortable with multi-year because I think I concur with some of the other comments that have been made. But I was more in favor of approval of the budget before year end. So I just tossing that out for discussion.
Well, we did that last year and it worked well, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was approved in January.
Yeah.
yeah.
Jerry?
Those are my similar comments was, we did it last year, let's continue. And I don't know if we ever get to December 1st to approve it or not, or December 31st, but January is good.
Oh,
Through you, Mayor. And when there's a new council sworn in, the budget cannot be passed until January of that year, the year after that they're sworn in. So that's something to keep in mind. So at 3 years, you can approve it in November, December. Every 4th year, it's going to be in January.
okay. All right, the fifth one, new projects we want to see implemented or investigated. Anyone wish to, Jerry's got some comments about sidewalks, Jerry?
Yes, and I know I spoke of Maple Street the last couple of budgets, and I know Maple's in the forecast to do the whole street. But I'm just wondering if there's any chance, and I'm assuming we do sidewalk work every year. I'm not sure if it would, well, I know it would warrant doing Maple Street because it is in terrible shape. At some point this year, I would hope, next year rather. So yeah, increasing the budget a little bit to help with that, or if we can do it within that budget, just put it on Public Works radar. And as Main Street, help me, is that county that would have to do that, the sidewalks on Main Street? I think, no, you're shaking your head. I knew it was.
No,
thought it was us.
that's us, and that's a conversation that needs to be had. And I think part of that would be through our water wastewater master plan, where we need to bring larger diameter water mains, and Maple Street is a possibility for that as opposed to going through the main or downtown. So these are things that we're all discussing through that process of the water wastewater master plan. I wish it was prepared for today because it would be helpful, but this time next year we'll have it in front of you, or before then for certain, but it would be a helpful tool for that. And a lot of the reconstructions and that sort of thing are going to fall in line with the infrastructure in the ground. So that's kind of our starting point with some of that stuff. Anyway.
Okay, go ahead, yep.
Just to add to Jake's comment, we're conscious of not putting asphalt and sidewalk down if we end up having to rip it back up. Sometimes that comes across as, just an excuse. I think in this instance, yeah, we're trying to be thoughtful about that, knowing that the master plan is going to steer some fairly significant works that, yeah, we don't want to end up doing things twice. So.
Okay, anything else on that one? If not, then we'll go to number 6. Anything else you feel will have an impact on the budget? Anybody want to make any comments on that one? Andrew?
I'd just like to actually wonder about the supply issue. Has that been basically resolved, like for hard items and trucks and that, or is there still issues with supply?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. There are still challenges out there. Heavy trucks are top of mind for something like that. We're having to order these units nearly a year or better in advance. If we don't, we're gonna be waiting even longer, and then you're into more maintenance costs and you fall behind. But there are still challenges. It's getting better. I'm not sure if it'll ever be fully corrected, but it is at least on its way.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else on that one? No? Okay, then we'll go to 7 about what services we would consider cutting. Anyone comment on that one? Andrew?
I kind of like what I'm reading from the Ellis counselor, some options, you know, we'll have to see how things go in the next couple of years, but hopefully we don't need to do that, but I think that maybe we don't have a good enough scope as counselors to understand what the possibilities are. That's all I'm saying. So just on the radar, maybe.
Okay, something to keep in mind, but in case we have to, hope we don't, but. And then does that go for the same for the next one too, about reducing? Something similar to that, but. Amanda?
Like, you know, obviously politically, it's never good to make those comments, but I think the reality is when we're, you know, facing so many pressures, and there's, you know, it was brought up earlier, but there's been a lot of factors and things that have happened in the world that have impacted us financially, and things have ended up costing more. And so if we were to look at options, this year would be the year to do it, not next year, is what I'm saying. So, and it's just about being practical to say, not to say that we're going to do those things, but to say that, yeah, we've looked at options. We've, you know, taken the time to actually ponder those things, because, you know, people are going to ask questions because there is only one taxpayer. And, you know, I want to be able to say, yes, we've looked at options, we've done X, Y, Z, or we've looked at options and, you know, is really going to, you know, impact the overall quality and service delivery. And therefore we chose not to do it, X, Y, Z. So I just think that, again, I know nobody wants to do that, but I just think it's worth putting out there, because I agree, like, I don't think I have the expertise to say, yes, we should be doing X, Y, Z. I don't really have a good sense of where those potential options could be, because we've never really considered them.
I know one thing staff has done is naturalize some areas, and I'm not sure in the last year or two, but we've cut back what we cut in grass is one thing that we have done. And I think they're working on Morningdale Park. So you're putting trees in, and that is going to become a natural area, and that's a huge area that gets cut in the grass right now. And so that's one spot that we're working on. There could be others that I'm not aware of, or maybe somebody else can jump in. Jake?
Yeah, one thing we've done with our fall gravel application, actually, which fell in this year's budget, was we, rather than a 3-year or 2-year cycle with our fall gravel, we've essentially gone to a 3-year cycle, and that's created some pretty significant savings for us, which is kind of for two purposes. One, for cutting some service costs, as well as trying to preserve the life of our gravel pit. That's another thing that I think council needs to start thinking more about, as the life is inevitably going to come to an end at some point, and us purchasing gravel is going to be, it's not going to be a good day when we run out of gravel at our pit. But anyways, just something that has gone on this past year as it relates to gravel.
And then the other thing that came to my mind is the vehicles. I know sometimes we extend the life of the vehicles longer than the fire trucks or the pickup trucks, or we keep them a little longer than what we really anticipated to. We are in good shape, so we, you know, we already are doing some things. I don't know, is anything else coming to anybody's mind that we're doing? That's a couple of them that I can think of.
Yeah, I think those are great examples. I think to the, when we post and introduce the public survey, that sometimes helps steer staff, even in terms of items where, you know, people, the residents here talk about items that they think, yeah, maybe we're overextending on, things of that nature. I'll be honest though, based on the conversation and the feedback I think all of our staff get, we normally get asked for more than we're providing, not any people that are asking for us to find ways to cut. But that's the nature of public service, and normally the people who are coming to the office or making calls, it's, yeah, they're looking for answers, not necessarily talking about the budget in that moment, right? They're looking for something else, but a lot of times it's about extending services or why aren't you offering that, as opposed to why aren't you reducing services? It's not normally the topic that comes up, but the survey itself, which we will get out earlier this year and for a longer period, hopefully, yeah, might steer us in some areas that we can at least do some analysis on.
Amanda?
Just like further to that, I think like that's a fair comment. Like, I don't think people would ever frame it but people would frame it as, why are my taxes so high, right? They'd be framing it in a different manner. But I think, to your point, I think there's also other pressures for us, because we have a lot of people that are coming, like, that are new to the township of Perth East, and maybe they've come from an area, like a bigger area that has a lot more services, and so they sort of expect the same service delivery or something similar. And so I think, you know, that's the tricky thing, is once you start offering services, to take those services away is pretty difficult. And so I think that's why we're always hesitant to add more, because of, you know, because of that concern.
Okay, is there anything else anyone wishes, Bob?
So later on in the agenda, there are some items that staff have raised. I guess some of those could fall into this category. One might be the grass cutting, and Mike and I kind of had a brief conversation about this. It was established many years ago for a certain reason. Maybe it's time to look at contracting some of these cemeteries that we've acquired out to some students that would like a job much cheaper than what we can do it for, or as Ron said, maybe doing a little less in some areas. So that's just an example of, are there other services that you would contract out amongst all that we do? Or if it doesn't make any sense, you want to keep your employees plowing the snow in the winter, then you find jobs for them to do, like grass cutting, right? So I want to know when we're going to talk about the staff suggestions later on. If they're just going to be received and then moved on, or are we going to, like Jake brings up the gravel. So I've never heard this conversation before about reducing our graveling amount or reducing the space throughout the years. It's never been discussed before. So I would entertain that conversation someday, along with what we do after, when it's a lot more expensive to buy it from some other municipality. Again, I know it's not something you cover tonight, but important conversations that ultimately have some pretty big consequences down the road. And same with the landfill. Like, you may as well have those conversations sooner as opposed to later, because it just gets more expensive the longer you leave it, right? So I
Well,
don't know if
maybe
there's.
when we get to 6.2, we could talk about the gravel, and we could talk about the landfill, and if there's something else that someone has questions on, we could have a discussion then and see where we want to take it. Okay, so we're at number 9. What services consider increasing, or how would they be funded? So Jeremy he suggested is the yard waste.
I'm not sure. You consider it sounds like it's
I can speak to that. Yeah, we did only have 36 vehicles come through that 5-hour window, which is not very significant considering the cost. I haven't done the numbers as to what that works out to per vehicle, but it is fairly expensive. We are going to be offering that again in the fall, and we will try and increase some advertising around that this year. And I will certainly report back to council with how that goes with some increased marketing.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on that one? Okay, then we'll move to number 10. What services would you consider adding and how would you see it funded? Is there anything anyone wishes to expand on that one? Bob?
So economic development in the county is obviously relatively new, to be honest. The county used to do nothing other than provide some funding as a grant to the Perth County Business Association. From there, I guess it's still evolving, and I see that it's taken on transportation, which is fine as long as the province continues to subsidize that service. What happens when the province pulls their money out? As far as the tourism piece, that's great, but I'd really like to see the jobs that have been created, the new businesses that have come to Perth East. What are the tangibles that have come from economic development? And I don't think you'd see a whole lot. In fact, I know you wouldn't see a whole lot. So like other municipalities, I think maybe it would be time for us to invest a little money ourselves to see some positive results, rather than the phone calls I receive that I was told you don't have anything in Perth East, or that service land, or what they want, and they've gone somewhere else. And I know just this past spring, I guess, I talked to a gentleman who's desperate to leave the region of Waterloo for various reasons. He's grown up in Perth East, and because we couldn't help him at the county, he's now relocated to East Shore Tavistock. So good for them, but unfortunately, we didn't have anything for him, which is a real shame. So, you know, he's taking the number of people that work for him, they're in another municipality and spending dollars, so you can see the ripple effect. So I think it's worthy of a conversation, whether it goes anywhere or not, but the economic development program at the county is fine, but I think there's a lot more that we could do ourselves going forward.
Amanda?
Is there, I think there's some good points that were just brought up by Councillor McMillan, but I wonder if it's worthwhile actually requesting from the county a proper breakdown in Perth East. Because I look at my ward, for example, like there's been another expansion at Noon in the last few years. There's been another expansion at, I forget the name of it. It's the dog sitting place, the Unleash. They've had a big expansion in their facility, not in my ward, but in Councillor McMillan's ward. We have our first winery in Perth County, which is in Perth East. Like there is definitely, certainly like these, there are businesses that, you know, I even look at in Ellis ward, at like a honey producer that's also doing some interesting kind of work with the county on farm kind of exposure on like honey producing and, you know, using beeswax to make candles. But I think like, you know, some of those things like I had to sort of like seek out for myself, and I like live in the area. So I don't think like some of the growth and some of the small business opportunities that are happening in the township are maybe not as well known. And I know the county does focus on certain businesses that are highly marketable outside, like in like as a county as a whole. Like I see certain businesses marketed over and over again, but not necessarily, it's not for everything. So perhaps it's worthwhile, like I know we get our reports, like the that they come and do the presentations, but perhaps it's like worthwhile getting another sort of breakdown. There are a lot more municipalities like investing in an economic development person, but before we would, in my personal opinion, before we would go that route, is trying to request some more of that information and that analysis and breakdown to see if like how we're feeling is actually true in the numbers or vice versa. Because I think there has been some growth in existing businesses. I've also lost businesses in my ward, like Iron Bridge in Ellis, like left, but we also have have a business that have moved a trucking business that's moved in. I know that we have the industrial park now that's in development, and so like some things have changed in the last, whatever, 5 years since I've been on council. But I think perhaps it's worthwhile getting some of that analysis. And I don't know whether they even keep track of that or how that all works. I'm sure that they do to some degree. But maybe we put up our hands and say, hey, we need a little bit more love. And by the way, the warden is also from Perth East, so we could really appreciate that. Could certainly help.
Good.
Thanks for the comments, both councillors. I think, Councillor McMillan, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the conversation that you're trying to lead to is more of an investment by Perth East in servicing industrial land and having an inventory available for potential businesses. I think that's what I'm hearing. I just want to make sure that that's, and the feedback I've gotten from the county, and this falls on me, is that the county economic development feels that part of economic development is a lower tier function, not an upper tier function. Whether I agree or not is a separate conversation, but that's been the, and to your point again, I think economic development at the County of Perth is still evolving to a certain degree and to making changes as things move forward. The Councillor Broadhagen, your comment as it relates to businesses coming in and out, in a lot of places, the economic development group falls within the planning sphere. So the changes as it relates to assessment are more directly aligned with what's happening in economic development. That's not the structure that currently exists right now. They're kind of two separate animals. So again, that becomes more of, we address site plan locally with county planning staff, and that could be an expansion at Beauchart's at noon, and it wouldn't necessarily fall within the radar of economic development. They wouldn't necessarily know that that was happening just by the nature of the planning process. So there's a bit of a disconnect, but I'm not suggesting there's a problem. I don't see it that way. I just think the industrial land piece, I do think, is a conversation for this council. I'm not a strong proponent myself in my role. I struggle with getting involved in kind of the real estate part of it. I don't think that's really a focus area, and we don't currently have the staffing to do that, in my opinion. But if council saw that as appropriate, it is a practice that's happening around us in other municipalities where they're purchasing land. They're going through the servicing process. Most of the time, they borrow the dollars to do it in anticipation of getting those dollars back when the lands are sold. But that's some speculation involved in that, and maybe I'm just nervous about that more than anything else. But I'm certainly open to the conversation around doing something like that. But I do think it would require some staffing conversations for Perth East.
So we do have an awful lot of businesses that are always making inquiries, and I hear what you're saying. We don't always have a spot to put them. And economic development can only do so much. They know where the land's available for sale. They tell the people, and they can go there or they can't. We are very lucky to have PERCON. They took on really what the township maybe should have took on, but we didn't, and we had a private company come forward. They're, at the point now that, I don't know how long they'll have lots to sell, because I think they're selling. I don't know for sure, but I think that they are, people are looking to go there, and they're not gonna have any trouble filling that up. But there's only so many places, like someone approached me too, and they wanted to do a storage unit, and they wanted 40 acres, and I went, holy, like 40 acres is an awful lot of agricultural land to take out of production too. So, same thing, they wanted to come, but we didn't have the spot, so. Bob?
Yes, so Mike is correct. I am referring to those inquiries that are looking for something specific. And, in Milverton, there's been a number of lots that were sold on Mill Street that are pretty easy to sell, right? I realize it's a pretty firm commitment to get into the real estate development business. But I think on one hand, it also steers your growth where, as an example, those that didn't want the Bateman subdivision, then that would have been a nice area for some light industrial, right? We looked at that, I think Andrew brought it up sometime this year, many years ago, and the servicing costs were huge and the land wasn't available. But if you did it back then, it would have been pretty cheap lots and the taxes. Anyway, same thing in Shakespeare. If you want to have a little industrial park somewhere, then that limits your future residential growth and everyone would be happy, right? So I think there's some pros and cons to doing it sometimes. I didn't want to forget Amanda's comment. She's right. There's a lot of great tourism things happening. There's a lot of great business expansion, retention stuff. But I think there's always some rule for us to at least delve into what more we could do, because that's what's happening in Stratford or St. Mary's in North Perth and West Perth. And those are our competitors, and sometimes they're in better shape than we are to make those projects go ahead. So anyway, it's just really future conversation.
Yeah, no, it's good. Good comments. Amanda?
I was just gonna add like reflection from the comments, and I'm glad you interpreted what Councilor McMillan was saying more correctly of his intent. But I think, you know, and this isn't a slag against the economic development team because they are award-winning, to be clear, but they are more marketers. It's more of a marketing department from my perspective than economic development. And maybe that's because that's what I see, but they do a phenomenal job at marketing, which is a part of economic development, but less on some of the other components of economic development. So that would be sort of my feedback. And it's not it's not, to be clear, not a slag against them. I think it's just every department has a focus and a strength, and that is one of their strengths.
Andrew?
Thank you, Your Honor. No, the serviced land or access to it, I think townships thrive on having a functional and very professional, and we're lucky to have that now, planning and building department, and that goes a long way because word of mouth is a lot, so we're in good shape for that. Two things. So if we took on some if a lower tier takes on some responsibility for some economic development, what does that do, if anything, to the levy, to the council, or to the county? It'd be nice if we're gonna take on some of that, maybe is that changed?
North Perth already has their own. I don't think West Perth does, do they?
I don't think they have a specific staff person.
No. I don't think you're gonna change the levy, Andrew, because we've had this discussion on other topics at the county, and the levy is, whether you take on your own, that's fine, but you're still gonna pay the same levy to the county. They're not gonna do
Okay,
this.
no, just curious.
Yeah.
It, makes sense, but they do provide a function for sure. I'm just trying to see if we can save some money here going forward. And I kind of tend to like the private people doing things, because they're not gonna do it if there's not a business case, generally. They've squared the circle, and then they've done all they can and penciled it out, and they're gonna run with it. I kind of like just providing the atmosphere for people, like the Millbank project, the Percon project, these other ones that have been really successful, just provide the support and without actually going full blown, Millbank's great. I'm up there constantly, probably keeping their lights on, all the money I'm spending at that store. But it's stuff like that. They've done it. They know it's viable. It kind of makes it's a little more responsible with the taxpayer money, in my opinion. But it's definitely probably should go with a discussion on that.
And some of that come from our planning department. They really encouraged what we have in Perth East to make it happen. They encouraged the Millbank store to be where it is, and they encouraged the Percon to be where it is. So we've been very fortunate that we've had people behind the scenes doing things that everybody doesn't see. So.
Yeah, you got that big grain silo at the Tama in there at the board. That's in Perth East, right? And the Wilmot, the grain silo there by the old Tama Inn going out Highway 7 and 8.
Oh, yeah.
That's great, eh?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, we've been very fortunate. for what's coming into Perthes so far, so. Okay, is there anything else? I think we're number 11, is that where we are? Okay, then, oh no, I'm sorry, but we just did 10, we are in 11. Provide comments, providing leading into future budget considerations. Anybody want to expand on what they put down there? Bob?
I guess a good example today is the severe storm, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna hear from a lot of farmers soon about the amount of water that's standing in their fields that can't get away because the ditches are full, right? I just think that everybody's aware that the winter storms can be more severe, given it could be freezing rain, it could be wet snow. And I don't think, what is there, a $60,000 winter maintenance reserve? I don't think it's gonna cover some of these catastrophic storms that wipe out trees that you're cleaning up for a month. And so I just think that if you're aware of the situations of extreme weather, then maybe we should have a little cushion for the days when there's gonna be huge problems. Everybody wants to get where they're going yesterday, so nobody's gonna be happy that the road's washed out on the one side or whatever else it is that's causing their delay, but it's gonna get more severe. So if staff had some crystal ball of what they might need, that would be great, but I just think we need a little more than what sits there now.
Okay, anyone else, Andrew?
Yeah, I got a couple spelling mistakes in mine, but that's just, can't see the line on the sheet. But so I know I'm not alone in this throughout southwestern Ontario. If a higher level of government, and we're product of their desire, that's great. We want you to do this, grow whatever, transportation, affordability, growth, whatever all these costs are for infrastructure, and if this is a budget item, I think I'd like to see, I know that staff always has it, but maybe a focus on saying, okay, that's fine, where's the money? Where's the money? How are we gonna fund this? Our transfers aren't what they used to be. How are we gonna fund this? Where are we gonna put it on? The developer's just gonna put it on the business. There goes, I'm not even gonna use the word affordable housing, attainable housing, right? So I understand, and since we're out of the regions that are really prescribed with being, must grow, we need to ask the question and get this money up front and look about the long-term funding for it too, the renewal and all that, and the asset management. It's a big deal. It's big bucks, right? So if we're going to have it, strongly suggested to this, what we're going to do, I think staff should have, and it's money, staff time is money, to look into, we're asking the question to whoever needs the question asked to, where's the money coming from to support all the infrastructure and all these other things, social challenges, where's the money coming from? That's my comment.
When you have a good point in it. I don't know if that's been asked at Rome or AMO, but they don't seem to give us answers. And I don't know if we need to come up with a resolution that we circulate to all the municipalities and see if we can get some support behind it. But I agree with you. They want us to do all this, but they don't want to give us the money to do it. Or what's this going to do to our schools? Like, our roads, our bridges, our hospitals, yeah. It's huge, and yet we don't seem to be getting any answers from where we're supposed to turn. Correct.
Yeah, I had one comment that I'd written down previously, reading through that, and then I think there's another piece that, from that conversation is, maybe there should be some direction to staff to work on a resolution that we circulate more broadly around the funding supports. My initial comment was to continue to pursue upper level government financial supports to ensure funding is available to address infrastructure needs, which is, that's been ongoing for hundreds of years. But it seems it comes out, to Councillor McAlpine's point, in dribs and drabs. We found out last week there's the Housing Accelerator Fund. There's a second phase of that coming out. We weren't eligible the first time around. It gets frustrating from a staff level, at least maybe just me, but to continue to have to apply for funds over and over and over, and then to be told, well, you're not a high priority area. Although we're continuing to be pressured to address attainability and affordability, well, if we're not a priority, quit telling us that we should be building houses here. Like either support us with it or get out of our ear kind of thing. So I think I'll come up with a better way to word a resolution for council to then circulate, but I think that will be kind of the basis of it. Because it does get frustrating. We hear the same things and we want to make positive impacts for the province. Many of us have young kids who we hope don't live in our house for the next 50 years. So we know housing's important and we want to be part of that, but yeah, we can't do it without the supports that others in larger urban areas are getting access to. So I think it is something that, yeah, it would be worthwhile staff giving some consideration, council supporting and circulating abroad.
Transportation's another one. Bob touched on it earlier too, like that is coming up, I think, in March of 2025. The funds run out that the government gave us, and yeah, all the municipalities are in the same boat. Are they? And I've said right from day one, they're going to download it to us, and I'm afraid that's where it's going to go. And then we're going to have to make the decision if we're going to continue it or change it or what. That's, yeah, because people depend on that to get to work and appointments, and so that's a big one that's going to come down the next year or so. Anything else then on, what was number 11? And we're going to 12, and it's townships currently pursuing environmental compliance proposal for the landfill. So here we can have the discussion for the landfill and what we want to do in the future with the landfill. Anybody? Go ahead.
I'll maybe just kick it off. I think a lot of the focus has been about looking for ways to expand the footprint of the landfill, and that's what the environmental compliance proposal is about. But I do think, you know, all of us are conscious that, you know, 15 years is not that far away, and landfill needs are not going to go away. So I do think it's probably worthwhile for council to give some consideration and support staff as it relates to looking for other ways of diversion. Whether it's, you know, I don't know if we're talking about bio type facilities or if we're talking about, yeah, strictly diversion activities, but I think it's probably worthwhile us pursuing some conversations with Blue Water Recycling. They're, you know, an expert in the field. Maybe they have some plans and ideas that we could look to implement to extend the life of our landfill so that, yeah, it can serve the purpose of people of Perth East for much longer than the next 20 years. But it's, yeah, it's not a unique issue, and it's probably one that's, we're going to hear more and more in this province over the next 20 years around landfill needs. And already many of our large cities are tracking it all over the place, and I don't think we want to be in that position sooner than later.
Yeah, on the landfill, somebody said that what was it in the last 15 or 20 years or something, there's been no new landfills in Ontario. So the fact is that once this baby's done, then I have no idea what we're going to do, because I doubt whether we'll ever get a possibility of making another landfill. And if we have to ship it someplace, that's going to be pretty expensive.
Andrew?
No, I recall a conversation somewhere, and I think our friends in Europe do this a bit. Incinerators, is that still a thing, or like, can you buy a share in it or how does that work? But really, it's pretty efficient. I've seen how they operate in that in smaller scales, and there's nothing coming out but a bit of heat, right? So I'm not sure whether that's something that still happens in Ontario or ever happened in Ontario.
Personally, I haven't explored that option. I've spent some time into smaller diversion items such as mattresses, styrofoam, shingles, things such as that. But yeah, that's certainly something we can explore. I think any capacity that we have is valuable. So anything we can turn away or put elsewhere is a positive. Even compost is another thing that we could consider. there's lots of options, some of which come with a cost, of course. That's, but in the grand scheme, the capacity we have is very valuable, so that needs to be part of the consideration.
Jeremy?
The other lower tiers to look at something countywide, right? If you're saying there's nothing approved in the last 20 years, everyone's gonna be going through this in the next 15 or 20 years as well, right? So maybe there's an opportunity to get one approval for a countywide, you know, landfill or something, I don't know. Or an incinerator. I thought the region had an incinerator. Okay, they're getting maybe an incinerator. Okay, I remember hearing talk of it, but I mean, that could be an option for the county, if that's a service that we could all benefit from instead of having 5 or 6 different landfills needing approval.
But where would you put it if you want, then you're gonna have to, if we're not getting approvals, how are we gonna have one at the county? We'd have to start over.
Right, I don't know, but I mean, if we're all generating, we all have the same issues, then yeah, what about the old gravel pit? No, if we all have experiencing these same issues, then we should be working on it together for a solution, right?
You,
One time I did mention that to Wes, and he said it would work probably for southeastern West, but not north, evidently had a huge capacity for it to get many years in the future. So I don't know, but maybe they could, if you could have an incinerator, like that a garbage incinerator, that could be something maybe that all four could go in, and that would have some other space and stuff too. So it would be, that would be something that you could do on a county line. I'm not sure that people can do it, but Oxford would have just one place and have a super town where everybody brings their stuff going on. Things that don't have to be done. It could be maybe other things you could do with them. That help keep the costs down.
Jake?
Yeah, I'd just like to add for council's awareness, like we do, this expansion that we're undergoing currently isn't the end of the line for us. There is further land, which is possible for expansion. There's a more rigorous, I guess, environmental aspect of that, but it is certainly a possibility. But again, it's very expensive to go through that process. So any capacity we can save now is valuable.
Just to comment on the incineration, I do believe the region of Waterloo is going to discuss it. It may be in the next 50 years, but it was discussed at the region some time ago, and I was all keen about it because I thought it was, you know, a conversation, but it's not for a long, long time. But, you know, it'll be $1 billion anyway, so. The hot potato of asking North Perth or West Perth to take your trash would be a political bloodbath, right? They're never gonna say yes to that. I believe West Perth have a 100-acre farm zone for a landfill, right? So like they have excess capacity forever, but yeah, they're never gonna take your waste, right? So, and as far as, you know, the 4 lower tiers coordinating on garbage pickup, gee, that sounds like a no-brainer, but that'll never happen, right? It's just common sense that you'd ask, you know, Blue Water to take it to the closest landfill, but you're gonna truck it 20 minutes away because you don't have an agreement with West Perth. So I think that we're stuck in Perth East, and if we can come up with encouraging people to reduce the amount of waste they produce, if we can encourage the province to be a little harder on those that generate so much waste. I know that's a big catchphrase, like, oh, I'm a zero waste producer. You're just giving your waste to someone else. That's all it is, right? So again, you know, maybe we're gonna ask staff to write a lot of letters out of this, and maybe you're gonna ask for other municipalities for support, but you gotta start somewhere. And if we're at a crunch time, let's start looking at some options. So you know, give it to staff and see what they can come up with as far as keeping our landfill alive for years to come.
Amanda?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that this is, it's not a glamorous topic, and it's often an afterthought, and I think, you know, we have our estimated, you know, years, but that is gonna change anytime there's a bit of growth that happens. And so that formula, like in terms of, you know, that we expect, needs to be taken into consideration, just similar to when we consider other infrastructure type things. The landfill is also one of those pieces. And I think of like the years of approval that it takes to go undergo some of this stuff. We need to be doing some of it now, because it is going to become a problem province-wide for sure.
Okay, Andrew?
Sorry, we never really got to the diversion part. What are your suggestions for the actual diversion and not?
I think I touched on some of them, but simple things for a starting point, such as mattresses, such as styrofoam, items that eat up a lot of space. They don't cost a lot for people to drop off, some of which can be recycled. There's lots of avenues there. There just needs to be a bit more time spent on pursuing them. And then, of course, we'd have to get council's endorsement because, again, a mattress, for instance, I went down this road. You're looking at basically a charge of $20 a mattress for a resident. And, you know, with that, there comes some concern, are these gonna end up in the ditch? There's lots of things to think about there. But I think it's a good place to start with the smaller items and expand from that.
Okay, anything else in that one? If not, we'll move to number 13, and that's recent review of Perthes strategic plan and the priority actions, and there's some different goals and actions listed there. Does anyone wish to expand on what they put down? No? Okay, so we go back to the start of this. We have a motion, and I don't know if there's any direction you want to give to staff. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
with council's indulgence, and this is a unique request, but I've jotted down, I think, some items that came out of the conversation, targeting between 3 and 5% as a maximum budget increase, continue to pursue upper level government financial supports to ensure funding is available to address infrastructure needs, ensure reserve contributions continue to help offset inflationary pressures and address future asset management needs. There was the comment around a broad resolution to be shared amongst municipalities, ensuring financial support for rural municipalities who may not be the focus of the housing accelerator funds, things of that nature. So I guess what I'm asking for is for a little discretion in terms of myself working with Ashley to come up with the resolution. We'll circulate it to council tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon, just so you guys make sure that we've captured what the conversation looked like. That's, I know it's not normal practice, but it's gives us a little bit of time to try to make sure we're making sense of the conversation.
Okay, so then then we won't move anything then? Can you receive it for information?
Yeah, I think at this point we receive it for information from a process standpoint.
Okay,
Ashley? It's direction that there would be a direction to staff, and that's, yeah, to prepare the follow-up resolution for consideration for next week.
that'll come to the next council meeting? Okay, so everybody? Oh. This is it. So,
I'll be honest, I don't love the suggestion. I think you guys mean well. I personally feel a little uncomfortable with that, with the thought. But I understand that it's probably easier to do that in many ways. I guess, like, I feel I'm a little bit hesitant with that approach. I don't know how others feel about it. Maybe others feel it's a big deal. I just feel like we're sitting around the chamber now and
to make sure that there's like consensus, because there might be components in what's drafted tomorrow that not everyone agrees with, and that's my concern.
Yep.
Like, not that I don't think you guys could synthesize it really well, I just worry about that. I don't know how others feel, but that's just my.
Andrew?
No, I can see that, definitely. Just bring it to the next meeting as a draft. It's nothing on it's urgent, right? Like, we'll meet next week, just bring it to pretty easy peasy, right?
When do we meet again?
August 7th.
August 7th. We don't. Yeah, there's only one meeting in July and August, correct? Yeah.
And then we can, if there's,
Yep.
we can match it from there. The hardest part is getting the next paper.
Yeah, so is that okay then?
I love that suggestion.
It'll come back. We'll still receive tonight for information, and then they will bring more. Okay, so. Okay, so Council of Township of Perth East received the report prepared by the Chief Administrative Officer dated July 16, 2024, entitled 2025 Council Budget Visioning, CAO-2024-10 for information, and we direct staff to prepare for the next council meeting a resolution. Okay, everybody good with that? Because we could be here half the night going through all this. Okay, do we have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Jeremy, second by Amanda. Any more questions? All in favor? Carried. Okay, then we'll move to the next item, and that's the 2025 budget concepts, and it goes through each department. So does each department head want to put you on the hot seat?
It takes a lot of pressure off me, so that'd be great.
Just maybe give us an insight of what yous are thinking, what you think we need to do, whether it's this year, next year. And so we have the Parks and Recreation. So Becky, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first, but the first point was actually Mike's point, so I'll pass it back to him.
So my point is that every year, except for this year that I've been here, the manager comes to me and says, we've got nobody who wants to do anything in the concession. So is it something that we want to consider? We have a new Tim Hortons that has just opened in Milverton. I'm sure Becky will tell us that the majority of the patrons that show up at the Perk are carrying Tim Hortons. They were doing that before the Tim Hortons opened. Is it time that we consider a different use for the concession? Again, notwithstanding, we do have somebody who came forward this year, and that might work out great, and this will become a moot issue, but it was just something. It is kind of sad to see that space just sitting empty when you go in there if there is not concession happening. So just, that was the basis for the comment.
Okay.
Okay, you just want to just keep going then?
Sure.
So the outsourcing for the lawn mowing, that was something that was already brought up. So we're actually meeting in the next couple of weeks just to look at that. All the properties that we do cut and where we don't have to cut as much, where we're doing at Morningdale right now, and to see whether or not there's opportunities for outsourcing or looking at students cutting that grass. Community Betterment Grant Program, Michael?
So, yeah, this is a concept that others are initiating, and I look back at some of the situations that council has worked through. In particular, the one that pops to mind is the playground at Kincora School. Again, worthwhile initiative, comes forward, they're looking for support from council. We have two existing policies that one's around providing a loan to those type of activities. The other one is more about providing supports if it's a municipally owned asset. In that instance, it wouldn't be the case, but again, we're kind of stuck. We don't really have an avenue to do that except going through the entire budget process and determining whether or not we want to support it or not support it. Some other municipalities are setting a budget around that. Let's say it's $20,000 a year. You establish an application process for community groups who are looking for support, whether it's for an event or it's an asset of some sort. They make application. All those applications are reviewed at one single time. Once the budget is spent, that's it for the year. You wait till the next year around that. So it's not a perfect model, but in these circumstances where we had the Stratford Hospital here a week ago looking for funding support. And again, it's either we try to address it through the entire budget process, or we set up maybe a grant program like this that has a budget established, has a process established for it that we go through on an annual basis, as opposed to, I won't say muddying the budget process, but those are one-off requests that we're not really currently set up to address for assets that aren't necessarily ours, or programs that aren't necessarily ours, or other items that are great within the community that have a significant impact on the community, but aren't necessarily things that we budget for.
Jerry?
Yeah, I think we're gonna need a bigger conversation around this entire program. I myself, I like the way we've done it over the years, where the one-offs come to us and we look at it. If it's within, if we can supply some funding, we supply it. Of course, 20,000, I know that was just an example, won't help the hospital, but with their request. We may get a year where we might get one applicant. What do? We just keep going with that 20,000, it keeps going up and up and up each year. One year we might get 10, and we're gonna disappoint six groups. So myself, I know it's to do this in the county, and it's a lot of work for staff to review all these as well. It's a lot of work to do the one-offs as well too, but I think, again, I'm not doing the work for it, but I think the one-offs come to us and then we make the decision, yes or no. But again, I think we need a bigger conversation on the entire program.
And I agree with Jerry. Like at the county, it's kind of got out of hand. Staff spend a couple days analyzing the applicants. And, you know, I believe if I want to give to something myself, I get a tax receipt. If I don't think we're in the business of collecting the taxpayers' dollars to give to other organizations, depending on what it is, right? If there's something they're providing a service within our community. We have a lot of recreation places, or I'll use them as an example, that they provide the service. They own the land, not us, but they're helping us out. So those I tend to want to help out a little bit more, but I'm not going to name any other organizations, but if I can get a tax receipt directly, then I want the tax receipt to myself, not to the township. But I kind of agree with Jerry, you know, maybe we're better to look at the one-offs and they all have the opportunity to apply. I don't want to see staff spend an awful lot of time checking the boxes to see if they meet the criteria, type of thing. Jeremy?
The way that it is, I think it's working just fine.
Anyone else? Nope.
I was just gonna weigh in, like, I think it's a great thought that's been put out, because it sets some more kind of parameters perhaps, but it does get a little nuanced and tricky, just the way with how, also like the way we currently handle it and how the public, like, it would be a huge change. So I'm more in favor of keeping it as is, but I do appreciate the thought. I think it's great that we're throwing out, like, even just the concessions booth, like, that we're putting out ideas, and that ideas are being brought forward to council for consideration, because I think, like, that is important. Maybe the bigger question is we need to maybe just revisit that policy to make sure that the wording is the way we want it. If we're going to keep it as is, that would be my only thought and suggestion. just so it's very clear for the public as well, like what the policy is currently.
Well,
Isn't that the problem? There is no policy for outside township groups? I think that's what I gathered the gist of this was.
So I think the policy, the way it's written is, in my opinion, and Paul and Becky, we've had this conversation before. They want me to, you know, we're in the front of this a little bit, but when it's outside groups that come forward, it doesn't fall into the policy that's currently written very well. Yeah, so we have an asset management plan. Part of asset management is to recognize that those assets are ours, so we have some level of responsibility. And we have some groups that come forward and look for, well, we just want a loan, but we know it's your asset, we'll get a loan and we'll pay it back, or we'll ask for your support, township, in getting a Trillium application or another funding application. It's just, and the one-offs, it works. It does work. It has worked in this community for a long time. It is a struggle a little bit for staff to try and figure out how to fit those requests in. But, so that was the reason I brought it forward, to try and find a way to make it easier for staff, myself included, when those type of requests come forward. We can look at the policy again, but it is hard to write a policy that's reflective of something that we own and we are responsible for, and something that someone else is going to be owning and responsible for. And then the consideration around tax receipts comes up as well. I am not a strong proponent of, well, if it's somewhere within Perth East, we issue a tax receipt, even though it's not our asset. That's not how it's supposed to work. But a lot of the groups that come forward are hopeful that that's something that we will provide for them as well. But we can address that through policy, to your point, Councillor Broadhagen, that to make it clear that, yeah, we're not going to issue receipts for asset purchases that are not township assets. So yeah, we can try and clean up the policy a little bit to make it more helpful to Becky and Paul, treasurer and manager, as well as the CAO. Is there anything, sorry,
Yeah, if I could just add to it, I think it is kind of a confusing grant application, because an organization that's looking after a facility will put in for money to grant for property that is ours, and in our lease agreements with the groups says that that the township looks after capital items. So it's kind of like we should be doing it the way our lease agreements are written up. We should be looking after those capital items. But then they're applying for money to pay for, and then it's like, well, who looks after purchasing that item, and then they get involved, and like, yeah, it can be quite confusing and struggles sometimes too. So I think looking at the existing policy should be reviewed as well. So, and if capital, again, if we can try to tie some of the park facilities into the 5 and 10, we can see that, you know, in 2027 or whatever, that the Shakespeare fencing is going to be needed to be replaced and that sort of things, where I don't think right now we have all of those other park facilities in our 5 and 10, and we probably should, because again, in our lease agreements, we're the ones that are responsible for it. I think that the grant application should be if XYZ group wants to come and put in something that's over and above what your standard facility would be. So it would be, I can't think of an example right now, of course, but it wouldn't be your lights or your fencing or your washroom fixing or something. That it would be something more, a new scoreboard that's extravagant or something. I think that would be more what that application was for, but for your need for the facility, capital items should be the township's responsibility, in my opinion.
Something like the bleachers that Shakespeare put in that time, like they're beautiful bleachers. I still remember
Right.
when they came, I thought, holy cow, but you know what, they did an awesome job, raised the money, we gave them some money, and they took it from there.
Correct,
And that's, to be an example of
Yeah.
something that's a little over and above. If we would have did it, I'm sure they wouldn't have got
No,
what they have there now.
right.
Right?
Would we have done? Right? So to get a Millbank Park, would we have done that project anyways if there wasn't volunteers to support and push that project forward?
Well, that's what I was saying, that if those items, if we start tracking that in our 5 of 10, which it hasn't been, if we start tracking those items, we should be coming to the realization that, yes, those bleachers need to be replaced. And if,
Or we wouldn't, and we would no longer use that facility.
Yes,
If there was no
right.
volunteer
If-
group to ask for that replacement to be done.
yeah,
To
or. if-
spearhead the
yeah.
project.
Well, in that situation, they didn't spearhead it.
To ask for it.
To ask for it, yeah.
We've gone to groups and said, ask them to take these things on.
Right.
And come to us with proposals in the past. We haven't always been the proponent to making replacements to some of our facilities. It has often been the user groups.
Correct.
Right?
Correct,
So
yes.
then the question is, would we be replacing them if those user groups didn't exist anyways?
Well, I guess that's when it goes back to us keeping more track of the capital items that are there, that we can identify that, okay, they're 25 years old, we see that they're not safe. We need to,
Right.
1, eliminate them, or 2, replace them.
But then we gotta be careful if we want them to, like, we were very fortunate with all the user groups that we have. We don't wanna be telling them, oh, this year you gotta replace all that fencing, and yet we own the asset, right? Like, I kinda like the way it is now. They come up with the idea, they come to us, and I hear what you're saying. though,
Yeah, and
but I
I'm
just-
saying it more the fact that if we're identifying that it's a safety issue
Yeah.
and it needs to be done, then yeah, we're not just gonna go out and replace the bleachers because. And certainly there would be discussions on anything that's being replaced with the organizations as well. But again, for the most part, they would come to us because they're the regular users and maintainers of it.
And then in the past, we did replace like standard, we didn't get repaid, we said that's like we kind of area.
Yeah, we did in Pat. Actually, that, yes,
Right, and we said it's not.
yes, which it was,
There's 5 or 6 different ways that
yeah.
Okay, go on.
The next one is Mike's as well.
Mike's the
Should have
idea
put
guy.
somebody else's first.
So, yeah, the downtown revitalization grant, again, this is an economic development issue in my mind, and it has been in lots of other places. It's been brought up in a couple different conversations since I've been here about doing something along these lines, and some of the funding, the accelerator funding, is geared towards kind of community improvement programs that's out there. I don't, this is for conversation amongst council. I don't know how you guys feel about these type of programs, whether you're supporters, some aren't. I can absolutely tell you that a lot of people, a lot of councils are not supportive of the idea of taking municipal levy dollars and handing it out to somebody else to improve their downtown business. But others believe that their downtown is your display of your municipality and that it deserves special focus. And so they endorse community improvement programs as an economic development initiative. So it's the idea of the sidewalk replacement in Main Street is an interesting topic because as soon as we go down that road, there will be significant pressure to make those sidewalks and entrances into downtown businesses accessible. Which that's something that we as a municipality are advocates for, but there's huge costs associated with that. So sometimes that's done through a community improvement program or through BIAs and things of that nature. But yeah, it's more just a conversation piece for council in terms of whether or not you see a need in any of our downtowns.
I do have a comment around that one. So we had programs in the past, like the RED program, that gave matching dollars for businesses, I don't know, this is 12, 14 years ago or something, if they wanted to revitalize their fascia, and I think they matched the dollars. I think more importantly to something like downtown revitalization is like the ongoing costs of keeping the downtown tidy. So in Milverton, what exists, and in Millbank, they have a community group that does it, but we have different community groups that are keeping the downtowns revitalized, I guess. They're watering the flowers, they're replacing park benches, they're doing things like that in the downtown core. And I think we just saw this year, the last $10,000 go out of our budget for the beautification committee in Milverton. There's gonna have to be money come from somewhere for that group, or it's not gonna exist anymore, and we're not going to have that any longer. And I think having stuff like that for the downtowns of our community, Shakespeare, Milverton, Millbank, Sebringville, that to me is more important than putting money into the capital upgrades that a business needs. It's just keeping those downtowns fresh and the everyday activities that have to, if we can get community groups to do them and fund them, that would be ideal. In some instances, maybe staff has to do these things too, right? Like beautification pays to put up the Christmas lights. I believe that's part of their budget, the Christmas lights, the Legion banners, stuff like that, right? So we want those things to continue happening, and if the budget's not there to do them, where does that money come from except from us? So not capital, which is what we might be referring to here for fascia upgrades, but more that ongoing cost in those budget items like that is what I think we need to support.
Anyone else? I tend to agree. One community now, they're working on their community improvement program, and they want to have it in place that if there's government grants, then you could qualify better for something like that. And I don't know if that's something we should be looking into a little bit more, that like we've got, like you said, the red grant in the past. Are the grants going to be given to more people that they have their community improvement program in place, right? You know what you're after. And maybe that's, we have to look at it more like that, that we need to put something in place so that when these grants come up that, yeah, we have this project or that project, or we're ready to go. I don't know if that's something.
The other alternative here is creating BIAs for the downtown cores of our various communities. And that's a big administrative task for staff as far as what I've looked into, because that's like a taxation on a core area, and we'd be administering that anyways. And then you need volunteers to deal with that as well. So I think a simpler approach would be to continue to support the groups that are doing it now and forward.
Anybody else on that one?
What happens in, I'm curious, what happens in downtown Shakespeare with what's going on there? If there's,
What's the highway, so it's the problem is MTO, so nothing.
they can't do anything.
So they're out, unless we attack Americans.
Yeah, currently there's just those banners, Shakespeare, and those are probably getting to the end of life too, because they're,
All right, and that's
Would be
staff that
result,
puts those up, our staff?
we pay, we don't put it up, we have to have a licensed electrician put the banners on.
We get money for that,
Same
right?
time that we did the signs,
Yeah.
so when Rostock
Right.
got signs, a couple of the other hamlet communities, and then some of the other communities got banners.
Right.
So we kind of, whatever each community kind of wanted, we tried to give some love across the township.
Yeah,
Yeah. But
I remember
think
that. Did seem like that's long ago, but it is longer than we think.
it was like, what, 5 years? It wasn't that long ago, because I haven't been on council for years and years, and that was when I was on council.
So if we have community groups willing to continue to do these things, we support them. If they're not, then we take that on. Kind of like some of our other facilities, right? We have that with our ball diamonds and stuff too, so. either we take it on or we give the money to groups that, you know, we get the budget every year from beautification, we give them the grant.
To a point though, because we have a whole lot of businesses at the farms, and I use the winery as an example, right? We have this, so are we gonna start giving them money too to keep their banners and their flowers? And I hear what you're saying, but there's also, you gotta remember that there's an awful lot of businesses in our rural communities as well.
I mean, if we're identifying core areas of downtowns, that's what DIAs are doing, so. So then we're just doing it ourselves as a municipality.
I guess we'll have to cross that bridge when it comes.
Yeah, basically, we're just gonna, I think we should just keep doing what we're doing, because it's working. And we just have to find where the money comes from, for example, for the beautification in Milverton. That's gonna be a line item now that we need to find out where that money's gonna come from, or somebody has to raise that money.
Well, the flowers are beautiful. I was noticing the other day, I can't believe the flowers that they have.
Yeah, I mean,
on the
it's
posts.
volunteer driven, they're out at 5:30 in the morning on the tractor.
Okay,
Okay, so the next one, completion of the Greenwood Park concept, which was brought up to council, last council meeting. Eventually looking at the accessibility of Morningdale Park with the washrooms, pavilion, parking trail system, and also the bridge to cross that, just for safety reasons as well. Eventually looking to have consistent signage at all the parks, or sort of like it's a branding of the township parks and recreation amenities. I know that the G2G Trail Group has been, has funds set aside for completion. They had come to council last budget for, they do have some money, but not enough yet, but to just have that in the back of the mind if they do come forth for a request. I know they're gonna have, just talking to Jake today, that they're gonna have a bigger expense coming up with drainage situation. And then in the next year or two, we probably should be looking at painting the perk. Just the color is really faded and it's getting very distressed looking. I don't have any idea of the cost of that yet, but just something to keep in mind that it's gonna be coming out in the next few years. I think
okay,
that's it.
Amanda?
I just have a question, just out of curiosity. You mentioned the G2G trail and drainage. So just hoping to elaborate more on that, because for those who don't know, the G2G trail is owned by Infrastructure Ontario. So that's a whole other can of worms. So I just want to flag that. And I know that's a big pain point for the volunteer groups because they lease the land from Infrastructure Ontario. So I'm just curious, could you just elaborate on the drainage piece?
Yeah, that's kind of a separate issue that came about today. There was a section between line 61 and road 140. There was a box culvert that's partially collapsed through there, and the trail had to be closed through that stretch. So it's, yeah, very early to say, but it looks to me as though there's going to be some significant cost there. And how that happens, I don't know. At this point, it is part of the municipal drain, so there's lots of variables in play there. But relating to the section of trail in town here, we'd certainly need to get approval from the Ministry of Infrastructure on being allowed to put a pathway through there. I don't imagine there would be a real pushback from them, but we would have to have that in place before we did anything there.
Okay, any other questions then from Becky's and Mike's for this game? If not, then we'll move to finance. Paula?
Okay, so I have a few items in the report. The first item being the folder stuffer machine. I have mixed opinions on this. It is a ancient machine, and every time they come in to service it, they tell us so, that we need to be thinking about replacing it. It still works. I don't know. I think it's around 5,000 to replace it, not big dollars. Replacement check printer is the next one. And in discussions with Matthew, he feels that there's probably a spare printer around that we can recycle for that, for the time being. And the final item I have on the report is the procurement and reserve policies. I've been trying to get these updated the last 2 years that I've been here, and I can get halfway to 3/4 of the way through it, and then it sits, and then I have to get back at it. So I'm not sure, I know other municipalities in the area have hired consultants to work on their procurement policy and their reserve policies. Is it the way we want to go? I don't know. It would get it done. It's a lot of money. It can be done in-house. It's just there was other projects that keep coming up. The chart of accounts, the financial system, budgeting systems. So I guess if council wants to direct to hire a consultant to ensure that these get done right away. And then for the reserve policy, there is the actual levels required for the reserves. That is a gray area that is very subjective to whoever's doing it. So if there was a little more guidance, if I could find a little more guidance on like set standards for those reserves balances. There's some out there, but not for all of them, so that might move along faster if I had consultants on that. But certainly they can be done in-house. It just may take a little longer. And there's 2 other items that I wanted to touch on that aren't in this report. I had mentioned previously the asset management plan update. That is due in 2025, and that will meet the final requirements for the OREG 588, and it will be required to be updated every 5 years going forward. So that'll be an ongoing item every 5 years. And then a continuation of the chart of accounts project that's ongoing now. The chart of accounts will probably go active late fall, and then that causes the issue of the budgeting system. So I was in discussions this afternoon with our current budgeting system, and it's going to be a complete re-implementation because of the chart of accounts change. I was hoping to keep the structure of the chart of accounts the same or very similar, so it wouldn't be, but it's, yeah, we've added a whole nother segment on it. So it's turning out to be a whole implementation, so I would like the RFP for that in 2025 to see maybe there's some better options out there that would provide an easy budget booklet for transparency and communication to the public and improve that part of the budget process. So those are the items from finance.
Okay, any questions from anyone? Jerry?
Just touching quickly on the procurement and reserve policies update for consultant, would there be other policies that if we chose to go a consultant way that would fall into the consultant to be updated? I'm just trying to save some money, but.
Those are the 2 big ones in finance that I would say need to be addressed sooner rather than later. And like I said, I have been working on them. They are partially there. It's just I gotta get that focused on it again. They're very expensive, and it's very time consuming to get them. I believe West Perth just went through consultants for their procurement policy, and yeah, it was pretty expensive. So.
How much is pretty expensive? Like, what is the range? Like, just so we know what we're talking.
I had a feeling you were gonna ask. It was very expensive. I would say 100,000, upwards of 100,000.
So we might as well hire somebody for a year to do that. Like 100,000, you might as well hire somebody for a year to do, here, you're updating all of our policies and stuff like that. Like, that's wild to me.
Okay, anything else anyone wants to mention? No? Okay, then we'll move to fire department, Bill.
Super. And yeah, thanks for bringing up the $100,000. I'll talk about a couple that aren't as expensive. But yeah, just a couple suggestions to put forward to council from the fire department. Probably one of the things that I think has had the most positive impact on the fire department since I've been here has been the implementation of the part-time training officer position. And I know that when we put in as a 18-month contract position. That contract is coming up at the end of the year, and I think that it would be good for the fire department with our training, morale, everything that we do with the training officer to transition that to a permanent part-time position at a few hours, not a whole lot of money. The return on that investment has been amazing. So it's definitely something that I hope we can look at. The second one is even less money than the part-time training officer. We discovered kind of an inadequacy as far as the way that we calculate our officers' pay and how CPI is applied to it. So I would like to take this opportunity to fix that. Once again, we're not talking huge dollars, but I think that it would fix it so that they would actually get, if council approved a CPI increase, it would be applied to their entire honorarium rather than a portion of it. And then that would kind of keep them, that separation between the officers and the firefighters, it would keep it at the same level. Right now, it's every year it deteriorates. And since Paul was able to add a couple of items, I just got two. Just one is more information, and it's basically Councillor McMillan's conversation about the increased costs of things. So my former fire department, they're building a new fire station in Talbotville, and they brought their building committee up here and went through the Milverton Fire Station and really liked it. So they are building a new fire station in Talbotville that is almost the mirror image of Milverton, and it's $4.3 million. We built this one less than 7 years ago for $1.3 million. So the Shakespeare Station, I'll be sitting on a veranda somewhere, retired, when it needs to be replaced. But right now, that's what you would be looking at to replace that Shakespeare Fire Station with something comparable to Milverton. So it's certainly something that we need to make sure that we're putting the right amounts of money away. We can't be basing it on pre-COVID figures. And the last thing, and I have no money involved in it whatsoever, but just to give council a reminder or an update, Perth South is going through a master fire plan process, and it is their master fire plan, but it will affect us somehow. So there may be some financial implications with that. The plan hasn't been released yet. I don't know when it will be released, but just to put that on council's radar that there may be some implications from that in the future.
Amanda?
Is there a way that we can get an update at our next fire committee meeting from Perth South, some of our friends, on the status of that and how that's looking? Because I think that would be helpful to know sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. The Perth South has actually requested that the consultants be able to join in the Joint Advisory Committee meeting virtually. So we'll hopefully have the consultants as part of the meeting in August.
Okay, any questions comments for Bill? Nope, okay, then we'll move on to building. And Mike?
Yeah, I'll speak to this one. The first point is pretty straightforward. We're just looking forward to working with the county as it relates to implementation of cloud permit. We've been successful here at Perth East in implementing it for the building permit issuance. It's cloud permit also has a planning application stream, so we're looking forward to working with them to hopefully, look for ways to streamline planning process. Right now, part of the challenge is that the county obviously offers planning services to us, so we end up with kind of two sets of records as it relates to kind of planning applications. So it does make tracking it a little bit complicated, not super complicated, but a little bit, and hopefully the introduction of cloud permit would have us all kind of working from the same spot. The zoning bylaw or the local improvement bylaw, this is kind of a gap that currently exists as it relates to Shakespeare specifically. There's wording as it relates to municipal water connections in the official plan, but nothing in the zoning bylaw that requires that new lot creation in Shakespeare is required to connect to the municipal water. So we end up a lot of times with, there's not a water main directly in front of a property, there's lots of challenges from a staff perspective in terms of giving direction to somebody who may be severing a lot or going through a plan of subdivision as it relates to whether or not they're required to extend the water main to service that property or they're putting in a private well. So it would be nice at some point to close that gap, that, staff understands that, we're accommodating to private wells, or we're looking to come up with a strict guideline, strict structure where we're extending water mains and people who are creating new lots are required to pay for those costs and are required to connect to the municipal water system.
Okay, any questions, Amanda?
Just a quick apologies. Didn't we sort of agree that we weren't gonna make it mandatory for people? Like, haven't we said that publicly? Like, I just want to make sure I understand, because
Sure.
this is like, this is obviously an issue in Shakespeare, but like it could spill over in other areas as well. So I'm just,
We have said that existing private well owners would not be forced to connect. These are for new lots that are created through either severance or plan of subdivision.
Okay, any comment or not?
I mean, look, I hear what he's saying, and I think that's one thought process, and there's certainly benefits to that. The only concern is it becomes problematic when you have like people living in a community and you have like a tiered system where it's like some people get to abide by these rules and some people get to abide by these rules, and so that creates that becomes really problematic, like politically. Like, I understand from like a practical standpoint, like that's what if we have that system in place and we want people to utilize it and connect to it, but it just like from a, like it is, in my personal opinion, highly problematic when you have, it's just like similar to when you have communities that are, like, I'm gonna give Seabrookville as an example. On one side it's Perth East and the other side is Perth South, and it's like really problematic in these communities. Same thing with Moncton. One side is West Perth, the other side is North Perth. There's always, it's maybe not a great analogy, but it complicates things, and it can coexist for sure, but it's just, it can become an issue. So I just wanted to state that it is, I think, tricky to manage that.
But a subdivision would have to connect. We're not gonna allow a subdivision to go in and they're putting in 50 wells.
I understand that, like, practicality, I understand that. I'm just saying from a issues management perspective, public communications perspective, it's tricky.
But I think the goal over time and it could take 50 years, it could take longer, is that everybody's gonna be hooked up to that municipal system sometime. It might take a long time for that to happen, but I don't think when you start letting new people come in, and especially if that goes right in front of their property, that the water's there and the sewer's there, that's how they have to connect. You can't let them start putting in wells yet. That was the idea of putting the water system there, and that was my thinking. Maybe I'm wrong at thinking that, but if someone wants to sever off a lot and that water system goes by their door, they connect to that. They don't put a well in their backyard.
Right.
Have to connect. The existing ones got to stay until someday their well
They'd be
quits.
grandfathered in, essentially.
Yeah, do they decide, or something happens to their well, or 2 or 3 wells, you know, I hope that never happens, but it could. They don't last forever, maybe they do.
All I care about is what we said publicly to the people, is that if you have a well today, you do not have to hook up to the system.
Right, but if you have a new lot, they don't have a well.
Right, I understand that, but I'm just saying, like, that's what I care about. I'm putting it out there that it's gonna be, like, it can become problematic, is what I'm saying. So, like, do we have a new subdivision going in right now in Sebringville?
Not a subdivision, no.
Shakespeare.
Sorry,
In
Shakespeare.
we have a new subdivision that's going in, but the provisions are in place for it to connect on William Shakespeare Street. So there is one there. There's the end of Sackville Street. There is a very loose proposal, I would say, around a subdivision, but there are severances that are occurring, and there are a number of lots where severances are potential within Shakespeare. And we are seeing those come forward, and one of the first questions they ask is, am I putting a private well in, or am I connecting to municipal water? And right now, as a staff, we don't have a clear direction on that. And so to your point, Councillor Rodhagen, the direction that I have, or that I'm giving to staff, is we have a municipal water system. We want people to connect. We're paying for that. There's economies of scale associated with this. This is a new lot creation. This is not a promise that we've made to somebody outside of the ones that are currently connected. So that's the direction that I've been providing, but it's not clear in our zoning bylaw. And so people are willing to challenge that, and I don't blame them. I think it's more hopeful for us from a staff perspective that we close the gap so that we know what our answer is to those people coming forward. I think the commitment that this council has made is different than we've seen in most communities. Most would pass a local improvement bylaw and would suggest to all of the private well owners, eventually you will connect. Maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 15 years, and you will contribute to the municipal water system. This council chose not to go that route. I think when we get to our master servicing, we're gonna have to look at ways to fund the extension of the water main, and that's gonna need to come from either reserves or borrowing dollars in the anticipation that people will connect over the next 20, 30 years. It's a different process than others have followed, but it is what it is, but it's these new lot creations, either through a severance or a plan of subdivision, that are a little bit muddy right now for us to try to address from a staff.
Basically net new.
Andrew?
Okay, a few things here. Hopefully I can help it along a little bit to get everybody happy here. So like Mr. Margaret just came on Andrew Street, they had a house, a lot severed, one of our old road allowances. And behind that is where this is generated from. He's down the street about 200 yards. Everyone around it is on wells. Some people asked to be on wells, or on
Everyone.
No, pretty well everybody, yeah. I think there's even one on the list that was sent that's not, I'm not gonna give the name on here, but so there is a water line from the old Festoso line at the end of the street. There is the Bell subdivision, and then there's one that Perth East negotiated going down to the top of the bottom of Webster there for a cluster of houses. So when you say subdivision, I think is kind of, it's in a policy and definition type. A subdivision can be a single lot, right? A single lot severance, right? That's a subdivided lot. That's what the province says, so I'm guessing, we call it a severance, but it is a subdivision. So a subdivision isn't like a massive thing like's going on in Perth South on the south side of the road. It can be subdividing a lot, right, into 2, 3, correct? Or
So a severance is a creation of a single lot.
okay,
Typically, from a planning perspective, when you're creating more than 3 lots, it's considered a planned subdivision.
yeah,
Some planning departments will allow for multiple severances, up to 5. County of Perth, they're within the UOP, they typically limited it to 2 severances, and then when you go beyond that, it's a planned subdivision.
yeah. So that's that 5 number. The number 5 is a good number if you look at the Clean Water Act for the number of users that can be on a well, community well, right? Communal well. 5 or 6, I think it's 5. So over 5. So the thing that's been when people have asked to connect and decided to drill a well in the past, and this is just coming from the community, it was, okay, so when I've basically put this infrastructure in for the township, you're gonna give me money back every time somebody in that, who knows how long the stretch will be, it could be 200 yards long, depending, because there's lots of unsevered lots in Shakespeare. So again, everybody else is on wells around it, you foot the bill for a very expensive water line, and then you're not gonna get anything, but yet we did it in one case at the bottom of Webster Street, it shows up on our financials. So you get $5,000 for every connection along a full street. So that part has been missing, and there's also obviously the well thing that everybody else in the area, and some who have asked to be connected to water, who were said basically drill a well for whatever reason. I'm not gonna suppose that I was part of that conversation, but I think that a number would be over 5, that this zoning bylaw update would be over 5, and it would take care of a lot of the stuff that's going to happen to be significant, and there'd be the cost advantage to the proponents. And then if there's people drilling wells all the time, they're on a group well, they want to get off the group well, they put their own well in, one in last week right behind my house, right? So they don't want to be on the town water, they want to drill their own well, right? So, and the cost of them to bring a line from this latest house would be astronomical. It would be probably 3 or 4 times the size. They're not doing a severance, but you know, it's a slippery slope. We have to make sure that we keep what we've been doing. So we have the financial implications of not getting money back, except for we made the exception in one case. You know, we have to be very careful. So I would say the easiest way to do it would be to pin that number at 5. Anything greater than 5 would be considered for town water, and that's what we're doing in the Wilhelm, and that's what we would do in a lot of other cases. The ones that are scattered throughout, basically people's backyards they've been holding on to, doesn't make a lot of sense, especially if they're not getting any financial consideration for all that infrastructure they're putting in for the township. So that would be my viewpoint from the word on the street.
Okay, anyone else on that one? Okay, if not, then we're gonna move to Public Works. Jake?
I only have a couple items for tonight that are more of conversation starters than anything, which I think are, you know, quite important. More will come. Again, I referenced it earlier with the water wastewater master plan. I didn't want to throw anything on the table that may not be the case, so we'll wait for that. But for tonight, a couple of items. As council knows, we reconstructed 140 all the way from 55 to 86 over the course of, I want to say it was 9 or 10 years. Some pretty significant dollars spent there. I think the intent was at some point that would get paved. I'm not saying anytime soon necessarily, but there was money spent. I think there needs to be some conversation around when and how that would look. There's some county implications as well. There's an intersection that could be
a bit of a safety issue at 72. But I think, yeah, the conversation needs to be had at some point, why we made that significant investment on 140. Not sure if there's any questions on that at the moment. It is, it's a boundary road with North Perth, so it would be a 50-50 as it was through the reconstruction, a 50-50 split. It was over the course of 9 to 10 years. Yep.
So are they in favor of paving too?
Not to my knowledge as of now. Again, I think part of the thinking was that the county would somewhat lead the charge on this one, but I'm not certain that's going to be the case. And I think there needs to be more conversations with, through me and through North Perth staff with the county, get some of their feedback on where this could go. But again, I just think the plan was at some point to reconstruct this road for a purpose, and it's worth looking at that and why we spent those dollars.
Andrew?
Thanks. Traffic counts? Traffic counts?
Yeah, we can certainly do traffic counts. I think we did a traffic count last fall. But again, I think this is a bit of a unique one where it's not a case we're looking to just convert a gravel road. We're looking to really actually redirect some traffic. This is a road that connects to Wellington Road 9, would lead you right to 55. I think it would act as a bit of a bypass for some traffic, whether it's trucks, whether it's general traffic, I don't know. But I'm thinking there was some planning that went into this initially. The traffic counts may not be a good measure, given it is, it is a gravel road at this point, and I think the traffic will change significantly given if there is pavement put down here.
Okay, Jerry?
So I'm gonna bring this up now, it kind of coincides with the next point. With the end of the life of the gravel pit, I could see us paving the entire township. It would save, obviously with the gravel, if we don't have a gravel pit, we could use the sale of that property to go towards asphalting the entire township.
I like the concept, certainly, Councillor Smith. I just think that the cost of gravel has gone up, as everybody's aware, a staggering amount over the past several years, but so too has the cost of asphalt and everything else. Even recycled asphalt, we found out has gone up a significant amount. And I think that's due in part to the aggregate shortage in the area. So I think it's something that needs to be looked into, whether it's through our internal staff or maybe we outsource, bring in a consultant on this. Maybe there's certain roads that make sense to convert earlier rather than later, try and extend our pit life. There's lots of avenues, but I think it's a pretty big topic that's going to have some significant financial implications long-term.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions for Jake? Do you have any more comments about the gravel pit then?
Not a whole lot that I really haven't spoken to yet, but I think we're looking at ways to be more selective with roads that we do put gravel down on. Some require it more than others. Historically, it's just certain tonnages have been put down on this road every year. Maybe we don't do that road one year and we put it elsewhere where it's more needed. Simple things like that to try and utilize the gravel that we have as best as possible. But yeah, I don't have an exact figure, but I think I would suggest we're probably less than 10 years away from the end of our gravel pit. And there's a lot of variables at play there. The geotechnical report we have isn't very thorough around the composition of the gravel pit. So if we run into sand seams that aren't stony, we may not get gravel that's suitable for our roads. There's lots of implications, but I would estimate somewhere around 10 years is what we've got there.
Wow, no comment?
Yeah, just quickly, this maybe reverts back to Councillor McMillan's earlier comment. There has been conversation that I've raised a couple of occasions with the other lower tiers and the county about gravel, because we all use gravel, and maybe this is something that we could look at collaboratively, and thus far, it hasn't carried much weight, unfortunately, but it may have to become political in order for it to maybe get more weight, but we all are big gravel users, all the lower and the upper tier, and we're all gonna fall into this at some point, and I guess it's whoever is in the most dire need seems to be the one that wants to lead the conversation, and the others leave the room, I guess, pointing and laughing at the state that the others are in. I don't know, but gravel, yeah, like and this is why the province is so supportive of aggregate use, because they are the biggest user of aggregate, but municipalities are right next, and having our own gravel pit, Perth East has saved themselves hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and probably close to $1 million by being able to utilize their own gravel as opposed to outsourcing it every year. So it's a very valuable asset, just like our landfill.
Okay, anyone else on that? No, okay, then we're going to move to the general comments. I'm thinking you're gonna lead them.
Yeah, quick drink to make sure I've got some voice left. So again, these are just more as it relates to conversation, but the training budget piece, I think this is something that we're going to talk about more at a staff level, about ensuring that we have the appropriate training dollars to support staff, in particular staff that require licensing as part of their roles and responsibilities with the township. Right now, those dollars are kind of lumped in with conferences and seminars, and I'm not suggesting those aren't important, and I'm not suggesting that we're looking to cut training budgets. I just think we're going to work to better understand where the training dollars are and where they should be focused. So I think that's just more of a piece that we'll work at kind of a management level. Council remuneration piece, it's been a number of years since this has been looked at, and more, it was looked at in 2022, I should say that, sorry, I'm jumping ahead to the next point. It's more that I want to make sure from a council perspective that we don't fall behind on where the council remuneration piece is, and implement the same practice that we're doing with staff around an external market review done each term of council. So that's a recommendation for a policy update. The conference expenses is where I was jumping to. The meal allowances, I hear from staff on a regular basis that you can't eat at Subway for $20 anymore, so that maybe those figures need to be reconsidered. And so again, I think that's something we'll look at as part of the budget process. The council expense limits have been fairly stagnant for a number of years, to my understanding. And yeah, I think we've had councillors who've exceeded the limits just by attending regular conferences. The costs associated with conferences have increased just like everything else, so it's probably time that we look at those limits again. This one I would like to spend a little bit of time discussing with council. This is an idea as it relates to kind of engaging more of our frontline staff as it relates to employee benefits. From what I understand, it's been close to 11 years since really the benefits piece has been delved into significantly and reconsidered. And when I talk about benefits, I tend to think of all of health, dental, vacation allotment, personal days, bereavement leave, long service awards, 4-day work weeks, all of those things. I don't like cherry picking items. I don't think that's fair to council. I like to look at the broader perspective, but I do think it's important that we engage our frontline staff and get some feedback from them as a way to engage them, and also give consideration to their contributions to the organization. So, yeah.
Consortium, correct. Still, does that involve changes to everyone on some of those items, or are we able to change ours outside of?
There is some flexibility as it relates to the benefits that you provide. There are costs involved if you go kind of beyond the consortium, but there are members of the consortium that don't have the identical not everybody has the identical provisions.
Okay.
Yeah. And some of these things are not tied to the consortium as well. Yep, correct. Correct. Yeah. I just, yeah, if there's any feedback about the concept or the idea, I'm happy to take that.
I like the idea of a committee because it gets everybody involved. The one thing that like I'm a little concerned about is a 4-day work week. I'd much rather see, and you see it, it's very common in other municipalities, like of all sizes, like more of a hybrid work model. I don't know what our policy is now currently, but something like that for me, I would be more open to that. The 4-day work week, I know there's, can't recall which municipality, it's like an adjacent one that, yeah, Wellesley, and that was a bit controversial, and I think it's a bit, like, from a political standpoint, tricky for councillors because people expect a certain service level, and so that would actually change service level, in my opinion. So just, I'm totally all for looking at sort of a mixed bag of things, but that I just think from a political standpoint is a bit sensitive. Not that we're not supporting staff, to be clear, like I think there's other sort of things that could be looked at, like hybrid work model. I know sometimes when you're advertising for positions and you're trying to recruit staff or retain staff, sometimes those like perks are really attractive to people. So I'd much rather see something like that than a 4-day work week. So I did want to comment on my personal thoughts on that one item in the list that was provided. And then also the, I brought it up once before, but the, I think it was Easter. I think it was the Monday. So a lot of like a lot of public servants, both provincially and municipally, have the Friday and Monday off, and so we have the Friday off here for your staff and not the Monday. So those types of things, like I think it's a great way to engage everybody and just really get a sense of kind of, you know, where people are at. But I just wanted to provide some of my 2 cents on that.
Okay, anyone else on that? Nope. Keep going.
Keep trucking here. So yeah, this one probably is not the first time it's reached this council table. The introduction of potentially one daytime council meeting per month. Lots of municipalities, Zora, Tavistock, Wellington North, Howick, Minto, Mapleton, Chatsworth, Perth South have all introduced that. I'm asked about it every once in a while from the staff perspective. I think you guys know from a council that it would be viewed positively from a staff standpoint, but we all recognize what we signed up for when we came here, so that's, but I wanted to raise it. The other piece around council attendance, manager staff attendance on an as-needed basis as opposed to full attendance at all meetings is another item that's been brought up and is another practice that happens in other municipalities. In some municipalities, if you have a report, you present your report, then you get to leave the council chambers. Some of us are stuck here, like the clerk, myself, probably the treasurer, probably the manager of public works for all meetings, but in other places, some of the other management staff aren't there for the entirety of the meetings. And there are pros and cons associated with that. I'm not suggesting there aren't. I would say that many of our staff, even our frontline, all of our frontline staff, watch the council meetings to stay up to speed, which is quite positive. Not all of them, but some of them absolutely do watch the council meetings. So it's another alternative that exists as opposed to being in the. It's true, right? But yeah. So yeah, those are a couple items that specific to as it relates to council, and there are some implications from a budget standpoint. Staff who are not managers are accumulating leave time when they're attending these meetings. Managers, our policy currently reads that each manager gets 5 additional leave days for attendance at meetings. So changing that would mean changing those policies. I don't know if there are any comments around that.
Any comments, questions?
I'm gonna just, I think, just flagging the daytime council meetings. I understand it's a burden on staff to come, but I just wanna, like, in terms of a demographic standpoint of the types of representatives you want on council, like for myself, I am the youngest person on this council. I would not be able to run for office if it was daytime. And so, like, if that's what people want and they want people who are retired, that's fine. But like, that's the kind of people you're gonna get representing you on council if you change that, because we do not get paid enough to take off a day off work and I don't want to use up all my holidays to use it to be on council. So I know that there's other people that feel the same way as I do around the council chamber. But I just wanted to like say that because I want people to hear from me directly. So if there was a decision made, I certainly would not be running for re-election, or, you know, I think it would, other candidates that might want to think about running for office, it might deter some of those people who are currently working. So that's all I want to say. I totally get it. It's not pleasant driving at home at night. You've got a family, especially in the winter. It's not fun, but I think that it just eliminates a whole certain segment of people that are going to be able to run for office and represent this municipality.
Okay, anyone else? Andrew?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, no, this is one that keeps coming back. I did kind of with Councillor Broadhagen's thing. I remember I was on the library board first 2 terms and on council. I did work afternoon shifts and I had to take holidays and right. So I figured the first 4 years I lost like $6,000 a year, right? Just that was the number that came up. It's a lot of money. So yeah, I understand it's not easy, or take a leave absence or take a, you know, holiday for it, right? So I did do that. It wasn't great, but I wasn't doing anything else anyway. So I just say maybe if this should happen, it should definitely coincide with a new term. It shouldn't be next year, next week. It should definitely have to coincide with the next term.
Yeah, the only comment I would make to that, Councillor McAlpine, is I think it needs to be implemented prior to the election, so people know that that's what they're running for. That's my opinion, but that's just my opinion. It's always going to be, well, let them worry about it next term. That's fine, and I'm not going to push this. This is not something that I'm passionate about. To be blunt, I knew what I was signing up for, and here I am. From a recruitment standpoint, younger staff are looking at places to offer daytime meetings and see that as a benefit to them, because they have young families and they have other commitments at nighttime or related to their children and things of that nature. So it'll be something that we'll have to overcome from a recruitment standpoint, and we've done that already. So I don't think it's a big deal. I just think in terms of the timing, it's tricky as to when the right time, if we were going to consider the change.
Jeremy?
I've been on this before as far as the county goes. This is the first time that I've seen this come up at Perthes since I've been here. Just to put that out there. I have not seen the issue or the request of daytime meetings come up in the 14 years I've been around, but I've tried the other way to ask the county to have evening meetings, which has been unsuccessful. But I have not seen the request since I've been around that we would have daytime meetings.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, you can. Okay.
All right, we'll just keep rolling here. The idea in terms of increasing students, not only to address workload, but to introduce younger people to the municipal employment opportunities. I think we've had a good experience over the last year anyways, as it relates to introducing some students in some of our workplaces. I think some workplaces are cringe about the idea of having students, but I think our mindset hopefully here is changing, and hopefully, I don't know if council's getting any feedback, and if you're not, that's probably a good sign. But certainly, yeah, the student that we've brought in, who's working within the office here, has done a really good job, I think, and he's fit in well, and I think it's a really good avenue for us to share some of our knowledge with somebody young and to dispel some of the myths that exist about municipal work for others. So I don't know if council has any feelings in particular around the students.
Jeremy?
Team members here, but over the last term and a half, I've actually participated in a couple of different events with schools where they asked me to come in and speak to them, which I think was hugely beneficial. We had that group from the school in Poole come here, and I spoke with them, and you were here, and Rhonda, you were on holidays. That went really well. I've also been to the Milverton School a couple times and spoke to them about what we do in the municipal government, and I did an online thing during COVID for my neighbor for her class. And I think that those little pieces are really beneficial to sort of an outreach from us to speak to some of these schools and some of the classes that are, learning about governance and the different levels. If we're able to do that, or even to get out there and do those things, if it's counselors or whoever it is, staff, I think it was really beneficial for those kids to come in here that day. Like more invitations like that to have them in would be great, I think. I don't know what grade kids are in when they start learning about this stuff, but just putting it out there to the schools, like, hey, you want a little trip? Come see our municipal facilities and see what, the first level of government actually does on the roads that you just drove here on, and the water that you just got out of the fountain,
Anyone else on that one?
Great. And then the final one was just the electronic signature usage. I think there's been some level of conversation about using a tool like DocuSign. A lot of, not just municipalities, a lot of businesses through COVID made that transition. We could trumpet it as a green initiative if we would go this way. It would require policy implementation so we all understand how it works. It's not just as easy as flicking a switch, but it is something that's out there, and yeah, others are heading that direction. So pros and cons associated with it is a different avenue, but it does tend to, save some paper, and you're not chasing after people for signatures.
We use it at work all the time, and document management is so much easier on e-sign. People sign their email, click the button, they read through it. It's way easier than having paper. I would push that one forward as quickly as we could.
So if you send the bylaws that way, then they're all electronically, or there'll still be paper copies, or what are you thinking of that end of it? Like, you getting rid of the paper totally? Is that what you're?
Eventually, but I think we were really just trumpeting the idea at this point, Rhonda. We haven't given too much thought because we didn't know whether or not it would support it. So I've seen where others have gone away that the paper, the bylaws are no longer paper at all. Yeah, it's just electronic. You basically in your email, kind of instantly at the end of the meeting, the bylaw would appear and then your electronic signature. I think that would be kind of down the road towards that.
Okay, any questions on that? No? Anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank council for the indulgence. This is slightly different, I know, than what has happened at these visioning meetings before. I think for the most part, my idea is that some of these things will probably come back to council, and hopefully you won't be completely shocked and awed saying, well, this never came up before. How come this is at our council meeting? We'll have this report to say, well, we slipped it in at the budget visioning meeting, so it's not a complete surprise. But
These things might show up at like one-time requests or service level increases at budget meeting then, most
Correct.
of these items, right? Whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so everybody's comfortable, that's what I was gonna ask, what the process here was. So we're receiving for information, and then I see Ashley's got some. It'll just, yeah, we don't need to direct staff or anything, okay? All right, so we just have a motion then that Council of the Township of Perth East receive the report prepared by the Chief Administrative Officer dated July 16, 2024, entitled 2025 Budget Concepts CAO-2024-11 for information. Moved by Amanda, second by Jerry, all in favor? Carried. Okay, and then we're going to move to the finance discussion item. So I believe Paula's going to lead that, right?
Yep. Thanks, Mayor Riggett. So the first item of information here is the consumer price index chart, and that is based on the budget policy and we take the CPI from July to June and average it out. Since the agenda went out, the June CPI came in at 2.70, so the average works out to a 3.13 right now for CPI. And then the next piece of information there is the historical CPI. So council has information from 2007 to 2024, technically 2025 with the 3.13 if approved at budget time. The next piece of information gives council a bit of numbers for a 1% levy increase based on the 2024 levy of $10,578,000. 1% would be $105,788. The 3.13%, the report had the 3.17%, and with the June CPI, that comes in at a $331,119. So it brings that down slightly. And then I just did a little bit of analysis on top of that form, if you want to go back to that, Matthew, sorry. I just did some analysis based on the 2024 budget for wages. A 3.13% increase would equal, I gotta pull it up. Sorry. It would equal approximately $180,000 increase. And that is equivalent to a 1.6% levy increase. So about half of the 3.13% would go to wages if approved by council, just so you have that idea. And then the remaining 160,000 approximately would be used towards inflationary increases in various areas, as well as if there's any service level increases or whatnot. So on to the next piece of correspondence. This is the reserve continuity schedule. And this I've estimated because I haven't brought financial statements forward yet, hopefully in August at the next meeting. I've estimated the surplus it's approximately 82,000 right now. And I just plunked that into the corporate reserve, just for information's sake. So at the end of 2024, reserves are estimated to equal 16.7 million.
So in development charges, I just have a question. We take a percentage out of that every year? Like, we put money away, right, when people are building or whatever, and then we take a percentage of that out when we need it, or how do we decide how much should come out of there? Like, there's a formula that we have to abide by?
I'll try. When the development charges were established, a background study was done to facilitate the capital works that would be needed to support the growth. So the monies that are coming out were established based on that capital forecast. So it's not a percentage, Rhonda. Okay. It's more based on In the background study, we identified water main expansion, I'm just making this up, on Mill Street, and it costs 1.5 million. So that 1.5 comes out in that year to support that process. So everything is based on that background study, which the background study is really forecasting out the works that will be required to support the growth, the capital works, I should make that clarification.
Okay, just a refresher on that, how it comes out, so, okay. And then I guess the other question is, like, their corporate reserve, or maybe that's contingency, went from 1.8 million down to 792,000.
I can answer that. That is the portion that we're covering out of the water project in Shakespeare that's going to be paid back over time.
Oh, that's fine, I just wondered, I didn't remember that, so. Okay, so anybody else with questions? Bob?
I don't think you can answer this right away, Paula, because I know it's complicated, but every budget that we always go through, I listen to people say, oh, you know, their neighbor can't afford their taxes, and then we get it all done, and that 3% increase is, you know, like $9. I know there's assessment growth. I guess I would prefer that we sometimes communicate more how much that 3% increase actually is. It's good for us. I know the county has their own problems to deal with, and that complicates things. I know social services and Spruce Lodge and everything is kind of unknown, but getting back to the assessment piece, and if we're writing letters to levels of government, I'd really like to see that 2016 assessment changed to more realistic value across the province, so that us in the rural areas would maybe find that someone in the urban center should be paying their fair share tax versus seeing what we're experiencing here. So if you can provide some information to us, what 3% equates, I'd really appreciate that. And if we could do some due diligence on encouraging the province to update the assessment schedule, that'd be great.
So just to clarify, Councillor McMillan, you want to know the real dollar tax impact of the 3% increase. So my household is assessed, the typical household is assessed at 350,000. We'll just pull out a number. What does that 3% budget increase mean from a real dollar? Like, is it $10? Is it $12? What does that number look like?
Yeah, so basically, when we're done and we have a number and we've got new growth and whatever building permits have generated revenue, we come down to and we say the average household assessment is this, and here's what you're gonna pay. And it's usually a fairly small number, right?
Okay, anyone else? Comments on that? Questions? No? Okay. Paula, you want to make a comment or keep going?
Yeah, I can just add a little bit to that. In the final budget presentation, normally we include the impact, the financial impacts to the average residential assessment, as well as industrial, commercial, and multi-res, I think we do. We would do farm too, and farm. So, and then I also have added in a slide in the slide deck of the average household expenses, like the everyday expenses, like your cell phone, an economical car, your household insurance, just for comparison's sake, because lots of times individuals don't think about how much those are adding up to, like a cable bill, a cell phone bill. Not many people have cable bills anymore with online streaming, but yeah, your internet and your cell phone bills, they add up over time. Food is ridiculous right now, so yeah. So I try to do those comparisons so that we have that, and I'll be mindful to make sure that I get those in front of council again.
Okay. Andrew?
I'm willing to offer my perspective, living here for, I don't know, 30 years or whatever. And this came from somebody else, I'm just recalling it, they're passed away now. That's why their taxes keep going up, and they've doubled in 10 years, basically 15 years. You know, they were whatever, $1,000. Now they're $3,000 for the same house, the same services, the same everything, but everything's 3 times as much, right? So it's only a small amount, like it's a cup of coffee or whatever you like to say, but it's still, our job, our business is providing services. And I know we haven't got a lot of control over the outside influences, but that perspective is very important, right? Because I've seen it in Toronto. I know people who retired, they bought their house, they were fully out and they couldn't afford their taxes and they had to move. So I don't want to see that happen here. So every little tiny bit, that's not our $3 a week, that's somebody else's $3 a week, right? So we have to be cognizant that this isn't our money.
I think we get that, but there's some costs that we can't control, right? And so, you know, a truck, how many years ago was 45,000? That same truck now is 110,000. Gas was $1, now it's $1.69. There's some things, unfortunately, we can't control. You know, I know what you're saying. It's like everything else in the world. It's going up and up. Wages are going up, and the cost of living is the products are going up. So I'm just not sure how we can do that. I know they're not getting any more services. They're still getting the same service. We haven't cut services, which, you know, I'm pretty happy that we haven't had to do that. I hope we never have to do that. But I hear what you're saying, Andrew, but I don't know how we're gonna do that. Because some things are out of our control. So. Okay,
I can continue on. Okay. So the next piece of information is a breakdown of the 2024 levy distribution. So it breaks it down by department and it shows the percentage of the levy as well as the dollar amount of the levy that's going to that area. So if there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
questions?
Yeah.
Andrew?
Thanks, this just came to me looking at the chart. Does this include for like the asset management? Is that everything, labor, all things, or is this just daily operations, or what is this?
This is the levy distribution, so it does include the dollar amounts that are transferred to capital for capital projects. So yes, it does include them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so the final piece of information from me is the continuity schedule on the unfunded capital projects that are still outstanding. And in 2024, we're projected to pay down the unfunded, or fund the unfunded by 100,000. So it'll be just under 600,000 that's outstanding.
Okay, any questions on that? Nope. Okay, anything else? That's it. Any questions? If not, we have a motion that Council of the Township of Perth East receive the finance discussion item chart prepared by the Manager of Financial Services / Treasurer dated July 11, 2023 for information. Moved by Hugh, second by Amanda. All in favor? Carried. Okay, we have no correspondence. Do we have any new business? If not, then we have the confirmatory bylaw, that bylaw 44-2024, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of Council of the Township of Perth East at its special meeting held on July 16, 2024, be read a first, second, and third time. Moved by Jeremy, second by Hugh. All in favor? Carried. And the last motion of the night, that the special meeting of Council be adjourned at 9:44 p.m. Moved by Amanda, second by Bob. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, everyone. Great night. Enjoy the rest of your night.